Chapter 1 to Chapter 3 of Zhang Ailing's Love in a Fallen City. Chapter 1. In order to save daylight, all the clocks in Shanghai were set forward 1 hour. However, Bai Gong only said, "We use old clocks. Their 10 o'clock is other people's 11 o'clock." They sing and sing out of tune, unable to keep up with the hukan of life. However, here only fourth master Bai sat alone in the dark, on the broken balcony. I played the hukan. While I was pulling, the doorbell rang downstairs. This is a rare thing in Baigamen. According to the old rules, people would never go out to visit guests in the evening if a visitor comes in the evening, or a telegram is received out of thin air, unless it is a major emergency. It is likely that someone has died. What's the matter? The one whom sixth sister left said he had pneumonia and died. The fourth master put down his hukan and walked into the room, asking, "Who gave the letter?" The third master said, "Mrs. Su." After saying that, he turned around and used a fan to chase away the third grandma and said, "Don't follow me to catch the excitement. Mrs. Su is still downstairs. She is fat and afraid of climbing stairs. Why don't you go and accompany her?" The third grandma went. The fourth master said thoughtfully, "Isn't the one who died a relative of Mrs. Su?" The third master said, "No. It seems that their family specially entrusted Mrs. Su to deliver the letter to us. Of course there is a purpose." The fourth master asked, "Could they want the sixth sister to go to the funeral?" Third master said, "Liu Mei, that's not what you said. We all know that he was sorry for you a lot. Now that he is dead, do you still remember it in your heart? The two aunts and grandmothers he left behind are naturally you can't keep it. Now you are going back to mourn him in an upright manner. Who dares to laugh at you? Although you have not given birth to a boy or a girl, he has many nephews. You can choose one and adopt him. The marriage has already been divorced. Years have passed. According to you, those legal procedures back then were all nonsense. We can't play around with the law. Now you're not afraid that I'm too worried. You've used up all my money. Now, you're not afraid that I'm too worried." The third master asked directly to her face, "I used your money? How much money did I spend on you? You live in our house, eat our food, drink our food in the past. It was just a matter of payment. Adding a person was just a pair of chopsticks. Now you go and ask, what is the price of rice? I didn't mention the money, but you mentioned the money." The fourth grandma stood behind the third master and laughed and said, "As for my own flesh and blood, I shouldn't talk about money. When it comes to money, it's a long time to talk. If I knew are you serious about breaking up, will I help you get a divorce? Breaking up a couple is a matter of no consequence. I, by Liusen, have sons, and I still count on them to provide for them in old age." Liusu was extremely angry, but instead he laughed loudly and said, Okay, it's all my fault. You were poor, and it was me who made you poor. You lost money, and it was me who brought you down. Your son died, and I was the one who harmed you. You should judge," said the fourth master. "Don't be anxious. If you have something to say, we will discuss it in the long run." Third brother, "This is all for you." Liusu let go of his hand angrily and went into the back room. "It's really uncomfortable. Your third sister-in-law is not in good spirits. It's not easy to support this family. You have to be considerate of them in various places. It's not possible now. I'm old. I'll leave as soon as I say goodbye. Now, I can't care about you. There's no such thing as a feast that lasts forever. If you follow me, it won't be a long-term solution, but it's more serious to go back, live with a child, and if you survive for more than 10 years, you will eventually make your mark." The fourth grandma agreed and shouted, "Here comes someone. Turn on the light." I heard a sound of footsteps, and some children with big hands and feet came to help the eldest lady carry the old lady downstairs. Chapter 2. The fourth grandma was rummaging through boxes and cabinets in the outer room to look for the old lady's private tea. She suddenly laughed and said, "Hey, seventh sister, you came out of nowhere. You scared me. What did I say? You just disappeared in a flash. I'm here, Balu whispered. I'm enjoying the cool air on the balcony. It really is that easy. Your fourth brother is not successful. Why don't I get a divorce? I also have an Natal family, so I don't have nowhere to go. But these days, I have to give them a good deal. I have a bit of a heart, so I have to take this into account. I can't rely on others to make them poor. I still have some sense of shame. While Liusu was kneeling forlornly in front of her mother's bed. When she heard these words, she pressed the flower shoe upper in her hand tightly to her heart. A needle poked into the shoe did not hurt even if she pricked her hand. She whispered, "It's impossible to live in this house." Suddenly she heard footsteps behind her and guessed it was her mother coming. Then he tried his best to calm himself down and said nothing. The mother she prayed for and her real mother were two different people. The man walked to the bed and sat down. When he spoke, it was Mrs. Su's voice. Mrs. Su advised, "Miss Sixth, don't be sad. Get up. Get up. It's a hot day." Mrs. Su pulled her to sit down on the edge of the bed together, quietly said, "You are too honest. Don't blame others for bullying. Your brothers have spent all your money. I should support you for the rest of my life." Liusu said, "If there was a way to survive, I would have left long ago. I haven't studied for 2 years, and I can't carry my shoulders or lift my hands. What can I do?" Su the wife said, "Looking for trouble is all fake, but it is true to find someone. But it is still a mortal connection. You can't live without someone." Liusu lowered his head, silent. "I'm going to blame you again. We've been divorced for 7 or 8 years. You had made up your mind earlier and moved away, so you would be less angry." Liusu said, "Auntie, you don't know. How can a family like ours be willing to let us go out to socialize?" Liusu said, "Is there any hope for Kimai's matter?" Mrs. Su said, "That's a bit revealing. I just wanted to let the ladies discuss it among themselves. I said I would go up and have a look at the 6th mess. Now it's time to go down. Can you take me down?" "Okay." Liusu had to help Mrs. Su go downstairs. The stairs were old and Mrs. Su was fat, walking with a creaking sound. In the main room, Liusu was about to turn on the light. Mrs. Su said, "No, you can see. They're in the east wing. Come with me. Let's talk and laugh, and the matter will be over. It's comfortable, but I really can't see anyone. I'm afraid I'll get into trouble by talking and let you down." Mrs. Su saw that Liusu would definitely refuse, so she let it go and pushed the door open herself. Liusu crossed her arms and hugged her own neck. 7 or 8 years passed in a blink of an eye. Are you young? It doesn't matter. You will be old in 2 years. The bits and pieces of light gold are the timid eyes of people in the past. Liusu suddenly screamed, covered her eyes, stumbled and climbed upstairs. Climbing upstairs, in her own room, she turned on the light, threw herself on the full-length mirror, and looked at herself. Fortunately, she is not that old yet. Her kind of petite body is the one that doesn't look old at all, always with a slim waist and budding breasts like a child. Her face, which used to be as white as porcelain, has now changed from porcelain to jade translucent, light green jade. The upper jaw was round at first, but in recent years it has gradually become pointed, making the small face look even cuter. The face is quite narrow, but the eyebrows are very wide, a pair of delicate, watery eyes. On the balcony, the 4th master played the huqin again, following the ups and downs of the tune. Liusu could not help but tilt his head, wink slightly, and make gestures. When she performed this performance in front of the mirror, the huqin no longer sounded like a huqin, but the shengshao, harp playing the solemn temple dance music. She took a few steps to the left and a few steps to the right. Each step she took seemed to be in time with the beat of lost ancient music. She suddenly smiled, a sinister, malicious smile, and the music stopped abruptly. The huqin outside continued to play, but what the huqin told was some distant story of loyalty, filial piety and justice, which was no longer relevant to her. At this time, the 4th master was hiding there alone playing the huqin. but it was because he knew that there was no room for him to comment in the family meeting downstairs. After Mrs. Su left, Prince Bai had to study and analyze her suggestions. Mrs. Su planned to act as a matchmaker for Balua to a man named Fan, who had recently had close contact with Mr. Zhu in mining affairs. Mrs. Su had always been familiar with his family background and considered him absolutely reliable. Fan Liuyuan's father is a famous overseas Chinese with many industries located in Ceylon, Malaysia and other places. Fan Liuyuan is 32 years old this year, and both his parents are dead. Everyone in the Bai family asked Mrs. Su why such a standard husband was still single. Mrs. Su told them that when Fan Liuyuan came back from England, countless ladies brought their daughters to their door and forced them to push them away. Let him intrigue and show off his powers. Have a great time. This compliment made him bad, and from then on he regarded women as mud under his feet. Due to the special environment in his childhood, his temper was a little weird. The union between his parents was informal. His father met an overseas Chinese socialite in London during an overseas expedition, and the two married secretly. My wife from my hometown also has some rumors. Because of fear of his wife's revenge, the second wife never dared to return to China. Fan Liuyuan grew up in England. After his father's death, although the eldest wife had two daughters, Fan Liuyuan had various difficulties in determining his identity legally. He lived alone in England and suffered some hardships before he obtained the right to inherit. To this day, the Fan family members still hold a hostile attitude toward him. So he always lives in Shanghai and never goes back to his old home in Guangzhou. When he was young, he suffered some stimulation, and gradually he went down the road of dissoluteness, whoring, gambling, eating, and doing everything. But he was not interested in family happiness. Grandma Baisi said, "You must be picky when you like such a person. We, seventh sister, are concubines, so we are afraid that others will look down upon us. It is a pity to leave such a good relative." Third master said, "He is also a concubine himself." Fourth grandma said, "But how powerful he is. How can we expect to be able to catch him with the stupidity of our seventh girl? My older girl is smarter. Don't look at her. People are not careful. Young, true knowledge is general." The third grandma said, "It seems that the age difference is too big." The fourth grandma said, "Oh, you don't know. The more that kind of person is, the more he likes the younger one. My elder, if it doesn't work out, there will be a second one." The third grandma said with a smile, "The second one of yours is 20 years younger than the one surnamed Fan." The fourth grandma quietly pulled her and said sternly, "Third sister-in-law, don't be so confused. You are protecting Chi Yadu. Who is she from the Bai family? There is only one layer of mother's belly between her. No one can get any benefits from her after marrying her. I am doing this all for everyone's best." However, old Mrs. Bai only wanted to be afraid of the personal criticism that she had treated the motherless Miss Chi badly. So she decided to follow the original plan and let Mrs. Su choose a day to treat the guests and introduce Balua to Fan Liuyuan. Third chapter. Mrs. Su took a two-pronged approach and at the same time found a man surnamed Zhang for Liusu who worked in the customs. The new wife had passed away and left 5 children behind. They were eager to renew their relationship. Mrs. Su advocated finishing Balu first, and then helping Liusu find a matchmaker, because Fan Liuyuan will go to Singapore soon. Bai Gong only regarded Liusu's remarriage as a joke, just to send her out. He had no choice but to ignore it and let Mrs. Su make trouble. For the sake of Baluo, he was so busy that everyone was on their backs. They are the same to daughters. On the one hand, they are in full swing, and on the other hand, they are deserted. In comparison, it is really embarrassing. Old Mrs. Bai collected all the gold beads in the family and put all the gold beads that could be placed on Baolu. When the girl in the third room celebrated her birthday, the old lady forced the third grandmother to take out a piece of silk clothing given by her godmother and make a cheongsam for Baoluo. The old lady's personal savings over the years were mostly made of leather goods, and she couldn't wear leather in the summer, so she had to pawn off a large mink coat and use the money to change a few pieces of jewelry into fashionable styles. Pearl earrings, emerald bracelets, emerald rings, Needless to say, make sure to dress up Palu beautifully. On that day, the old lady, the third master, the third grandma, the fourth master, and the fourth grandma will naturally go. Balu heard about fourth grandma's conspiracy over and over again, and was really annoyed with her. He refused to appear at the same time as fourth grandma's two daughters, and was too embarrassed to say that he didn't want them, so he tried his best to drag Liusu along. There were 7 people sitting in a bus on a business trip, and it was impossible to squeeze in any more, so the fourth grandmother's daughter, Jinzi Jinshan, was eliminated. They set out at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and did not return home until 11 o'clock in the evening. Where can I rest assured and sleep well with golden branches and golden cicadas? They were eagerly awaiting their return, but everyone was speechless. Balu walked to the old lady's room with a sullen face. A gust of wind peeled off all the condoms, returned them to the old lady, and went back to the room without saying a word. Jinzi Jinshan dragged the fourth grandma to the balcony and kept asking what was wrong. The fourth grandma said angrily, "I have never seen a girl like yours, and you are not on a blind date, so you want to be so hot." The third grandma followed and said softly, "Don't let others know what you are saying. Don't worry about it." The fourth grandma simply shouted towards Liusu's room. "I just pointed out Sang and scolded Huai. So what if I scolded her? It's not like I haven't seen a man in thousands of years. So why does he get phlegm in his heart when he smells anger? Have you gone crazy?" Jinzi Jinshan was confused by her scolding. The third grandmother did her best to stabilize their mother, and then told them, "We are going to watch a movie first." Jinzi said in surprise, "Watching a movie?" Third grandma said, "It's not weird. I went there just to watch people. I sat in the dark shadow and couldn't see anything." Later, Mrs. Su told me that it was all Mr. Fan's idea. There he is picking out the bad things. He wants to leave the house for 2 or 3 hours. His face is oily and the rouge pollen has faded, so he can look more friendly. That is Mrs. Su's guess. As far as I can see, that surname Fan has never been sincere. He wanted to watch a movie just because he was too lazy to socialize with us. After watching the play, didn't he just want to run away? Fourth grandma couldn't help but interjected, "What's going on today? It was pretty good. If it weren't for the people in our own nest making trouble, there would have been 70% to 80% success." Jinzi Jinshan said in unison. Third ma, "What happened next?" "What happened next?" Third grandma said. "What happened next?" Mrs. Su grabbed him and asked everyone to go to dinner together. He said it was a treat. The fourth grandma clapped her hands and said, "Let's eat when we are eating." What does it mean to go to the dance hall and just sit around knowing that our 7th daughter can't dance? I'm not telling you, it's third brother's fault. He's also a wonder outside. When he heard Fan telling the driver to go to the dance floor, he didn't stop him. Third grandma said hurriedly, "With so many restaurants in Shanghai, how do you know which restaurants have dancing and which ones don't? He is not as idle as fourth master, and he doesn't have so much time to investigate this." Jinzi Jinshan also wanted to inquire about the future development. "How much did third grandma give fourth grandma?" Every time I got interrupted, I lost interest. He just said, "After that, we had dinner. After dinner, we came back." Jinshan asked, "What kind of person is Fan Liuyuan?" Third grandma said, "How do I know? I never heard him say 3 words." After thinking for a while, she said, "You are a good dancer." Jinzi exclaimed, "Who is he dancing with?" The fourth grandmother answered first. "Who else is it? But it's not your 6th aunt. In our Shili family, no one is allowed to learn to dance, so she is the only one who can get married." Later, she learned this skill from her talented uncle. How embarrassing when people ask you, "Why don't you get married if you say you can't dance?" It's not a shame if you can't. Like your third mother, like me, they all come from rich families. Miss, after living half of my life, what part of the world have I not seen? We don't know how to dance. The third grandma sighed and said, "I danced once, saying it was just to show off my face, but I danced a 2nd time and a 3rd time." Jinzi Jinshan couldn't help but be speechless when he heard this. The fourth grandma murmured to the other side again, "Lard has deceived your heart. If you think that you have ruined your sister's affairs, you have hope. I tell you to give up this idea as soon as possible. There are many young ladies who have if you don't like it. He will want you, a loser. Liusu and Balu lived in the same room. Balu had already gone to bed. Liusu squatted on the ground and touched the black dots of mosquito coils. He could hear clearly what was said on the balcony, but this time she was very calm and polished. The match, watching it burn away, the small red pennant swaying in its own wind moved to her finger. She blew it out with a pop, leaving only a piece of red. The small flagpole and the flagpole are also withered, and a gray and curled ghost shadow hangs down. She dropped the burnt match on the plate. She didn't mean what happened today, but anyway, she gave them a little color to see. Do they think her life is over? Morning. She smiled. Balu must also be scolding her in his heart, and the scolding was even worse than the fourth grandmother's words. But she knew that although Baal Woan hated her, he also looked at her with admiration and respect. A woman, no matter how good she is, cannot win the love of the opposite sex, nor the respect of the same sex. Women are just so mean. Does Fan Liuan really like her? That's not necessarily the case. She didn't believe a word of what he said to her. She could see that he was used to telling lies to women, and she couldn't help but be careful. She was a helpless person, and she only had herself. The moon-white organza cheongsam she took off hung on the bed frame. She leaned over and sat on the ground, hugged the knees of her robe, and rested her face on them solemnly. The green mosquito repellent incense floated up in puffs and puffs until it reached my brain. Tears glistened in her eyes. A few days later, Mrs. Su came to Baigamen again. The fourth grandma had already prophesied. Our sixth aunt's grandma is making such nonsense, and the seventh girl's matter has been blown away. Isn't Mrs. Su upset? Mrs. Su blamed the sixth aunt's grandma, and is she still willing to introduce someone to her? This is called stealing. The chicken loses the rice. As expected, Mrs. Su is no longer as hot-tempered as before, so she goes a long way to explain why she hasn't come to the door in the past 2 days. The master of the family has something important to go to Hong Kong to contact. If everything goes well, he plans to rent a house in Hong Kong and live there for 1.5 years. So she has been busy packing her luggage these 2 days and preparing to accompany him. As for the Balu incident, Van is no longer in Shanghai, so we have to put it aside for the time being. Mrs. Su found out that Tassel's possible partner was named Zhang. It turned out that he had someone outside, and it would be a bit troublesome to take it apart. According to Mrs. Su, this kind of person is not very reliable, so forget it. After hearing this, the third grandma and the fourth grandma winked at each other, curled their lips and smiled. Mrs. Su then frowned and said that one of ours has a lot of friends in Hong Kong, but it's a pity that distant waters can't save close fires. If Miss Six could go there, she might have a lot of friends. Opportunity. In the past 2 years, it can be said that there are a lot of talents from Shanghaians in Hong Kong. Shanghaians naturally like Shanghaians, so the ladies from the same hometown are heard to be very popular there. Miss Six has gone, and is she still worried? Quite a person? You can really pick it up by the handful. Everyone felt that Mrs. Su was really good at speaking. 2 days ago, there was a lot of fuss about matchmaking, but suddenly the fire was extinguished. She had no choice but to make excuses, and made a few sarcastic remarks. Old Mrs. Bai sighed and said, "It's not easy to go to Hong Kong. It's easier said than done." Unexpectedly, Mrs. Su quickly cut her off and said, "If Miss Six is willing to go, I'll invite her, and I promise to help her, and I will help her to the end." Everyone couldn't help but look at each other. Even Liusu was stunned. She estimated that when Mrs. Su volunteered to be her matchmaker, she must have been righteous and sincerely sympathized with her plight. He ran errands to find connections for her, and invited the man named Zhang to a banquet. This was a bit of friendship, but it would be expensive to take her to Hong Kong. Why did Mrs. Su spend all this money on her out of thin air? Although there are many good people in the world, not many fools are willing to be good people in terms of money. Mrs. Su must have some background. Could it be Fan Liuyuan's trick? Mrs. Su once said that her husband and Fan Liuyuan had close business contacts. and the couple probably supported Fan Liuan enthusiastically. It is also possible to sacrifice an irrelevant and lonely relative to curry favor with him. Liusu was thinking wildly here, and old Mrs. Bai said, "That can't be done. I can't let you." Mrs. Su laughed and said, "It doesn't matter. I can still afford this little thing. Besides, I still have hope. I am asking Miss Six to help me. I am dragging the children with me. My blood pressure is high, and I am exhausted. With her on the road, I have someone to take care of everything. I don't treat her as an outsider, and I will have to worry about her a lot in the future." Mrs. Bai was busy trying to be polite on Liusu's behalf. Mrs. Su turned around and asked straight to the point, "So Miss Six, you must come with us. Even if it's just for a stroll. It's worth it." Liusu lowered his head and smiled. "You've been so kind to me." She quickly calculated that the matter with the surname Zhang was hopeless. Even if someone acted as a matchmaker for her in the future, they would only be on par with the one with the surname Zhang, maybe not as good as him. Liusu's father was a famous gambler who lost all his money gambling and was the first to lead them on the road to ruin. Liusu's hands had never touched dominoes or dice, but she also liked gambling, and she decided to use her future to bet. If she loses, her reputation will be discredited and she will be unqualified to be a stepmother to her 5 children. If she wins the bet, she can get Fan Liuan, the object that her family is coveting, which will relieve the pain in her chest.
Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.